The Middle East, a region perpetually on the brink, was shaken once more on July 31st. Ismail Haniyeh, a prominent figure in Hamas and a key player in the Palestinian struggle, was killed. The circumstances were shrouded in mystery. The location, however, was not. Tehran, the heart of Iran, became the backdrop for an assassination that sent shockwaves through the region. While no nation claimed responsibility, fingers quickly pointed towards Israel. Israel, with its history of targeted operations against Hamas leadership, remained characteristically silent. This silence, however, spoke volumes. The assassination of Haniyeh represented a dangerous escalation, a spark in a tinderbox of historical grievances and simmering tensions. The world braced itself. Would this be the catalyst for a full-blown conflict? Iran, a nation known for its swift and decisive responses, remained uncharacteristically quiet. This silence, however, was not a sign of weakness, but rather a calculated strategy. The world watched, waited, and wondered what Iran's next move would be. In the aftermath of Haniyeh's assassination, the world anticipated an immediate response from Iran. Instead, Tehran responded with calculated silence. This measured approach signaled a strategic shift. Several factors contributed to Iran's decision to exercise restraint. The ongoing conflict in Gaza demanded careful consideration. The international community urged all parties to avoid escalation. Iran understood the need to navigate the situation carefully. A measured response projected strength through calculated restraint. The silence from Tehran was punctuated by pointed accusations. Iranian officials, with unwavering certainty, placed the blame for Haniyeh's assassination squarely on Israel's shoulders. This direct accusation, devoid of ambiguity, further heightened the already palpable tension. Israel, in its typical fashion, offered no comment on the allegations. The international community, however, was far from silent. Concerns arose from global powers and regional players alike. The assassination, a blatant act of aggression, threatened to unravel the fragile peace in the region. The United Nations, echoing the global sentiment, called for restraint and urged all parties to engage in dialogue. The European Union, invested in regional stability, expressed deep concern over the potential for escalation. The assassination of Haniyeh was not simply an internal matter. It had far-reaching implications, threatening to ignite a conflict with global consequences. The world watched with bated breath, the specter of war looming large. The situation, volatile and unpredictable, had the potential to spiral out of control. The assassination of Haniyeh had brought the world to a standstill, the fate of the Middle East hanging precariously in the balance. The United States, a steadfast ally of Israel, found itself in a precarious position. The assassination of Haniyeh presented a diplomatic quagmire. Secretary of State Antony Blinken spearheaded the U.S. diplomatic effort, his mission to de-escalate the situation and prevent an all-out war. Iran viewed Washington's calls for restraint with suspicion. The long and tumultuous history between the two nations cast a long shadow over diplomatic efforts. The U.S. faced a critical test, balancing its commitment to Israel and regional stability. Section 5. A History of Shadows, the Iran-Israel Conflict. The assassination of Haniyeh was not an isolated incident. It was rather the latest chapter in a long and convoluted history of animosity between Iran and Israel. This complex relationship, characterized by proxy conflicts, covert operations, and mutual distrust, had its roots in the tumultuous history of the Middle East. The 1979 Islamic Revolution in Iran marked a turning point. The overthrow of the US-backed Shah and the establishment of an Islamic Republic sent shockwaves through the region. Israel, a close ally of the deposed Shah, viewed the new regime with suspicion and hostility. The following decades witnessed a series of proxy conflicts, with both nations supporting opposing sides in regional conflicts. Lebanon, Gaza, and Syria became battlegrounds for this shadow war, fueling animosity and mistrust. The assassination of Haniyeh, against this backdrop of historical animosity, represented a dangerous escalation. It threatened to shatter the fragile peace and ignite a direct conflict between the two regional powers. The world watched with bated breath, hoping that cooler heads would prevail. Section 6. The Specter of Escalation, a Region on Edge. The Middle East held its breath. The assassination of Haniyeh had created a powder keg, and the fuse had been lit. The potential for escalation, a terrifying thought, loomed large. Both Iran and Israel, possessing significant military capabilities, had shown a willingness to use force to achieve their objectives. Iran, with its vast missile arsenal and network of regional proxies, had the capacity to inflict significant damage on Israel. Israel, on the other hand, boasted one of the most technologically advanced militaries in the world, equipped with a formidable nuclear arsenal. The lack of direct communication channels between the two countries further heightened the risk of miscalculation. Misunderstandings fueled by decades of mistrust could easily escalate into a full-blown conflict. The stakes, already incredibly high, continued to rise with each passing day. The international community, acutely aware of the potential consequences, desperately sought ways to defuse the situation. The specter of a wider war, one that could engulf the entire region, loomed large. The world watched, waited, and prayed for peace. Section 7. Diplomatic efforts, a race against time. As tensions reached a fever pitch, a flurry of diplomatic activity ensued. The international community, recognizing the urgency of the situation, sprang into action, desperate to avert a catastrophic war. Diplomats, envoys, and mediators crisscrossed the globe, engaging in frantic shuttle diplomacy. The United Nations, a symbol of international cooperation, played a pivotal role in these efforts. The Security Council, convened for an emergency session, issued a unanimous statement condemning the assassination and calling for restraint from all parties. The European Union, a major economic partner to both Iran and Israel, threw its diplomatic weight behind the peace efforts. European diplomats engaged in high-level talks, urging both sides to step back from the brink. The diplomatic efforts, while commendable, faced significant obstacles. Decades of mistrust and animosity could not be erased overnight. The lack of direct communication channels between Iran and Israel further complicated matters, hindering the flow of information and increasing the risk of misinterpretation. Section 8. The role of proxy warfare, fueling the fire. Adding fuel to the already volatile situation was the pervasive presence of proxy warfare in the region. Both Iran and Israel for decades had engaged in a shadow war, supporting opposing sides in regional conflicts. This indirect confrontation, while avoiding direct military confrontation, served only to exacerbate tensions and deepen mistrust. Iran, through its support of Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in Gaza, exerted significant influence in the region. These groups, armed and funded by Iran, posed a constant threat to Israel's security, fueling a cycle of violence and retaliation. Israel, for its part, had conducted numerous covert operations against Iranian interests in the region. These operations, targeting Iranian military installations and personnel, were designed to weaken Iran's influence and deter aggression. The assassination of Haniyeh, against this backdrop of proxy warfare, represented a dangerous escalation. It threatened to shatter the fragile status quo and draw both nations into a direct and potentially catastrophic conflict. Section 9. Global implications, a wider conflict brewing. The escalating tensions between Iran and Israel had far-reaching implications extending well beyond the confines of the Middle East. The potential for a wider conflict, one that could draw in global powers, sent shockwaves through the international community. The United States, with its unwavering commitment to Israel's security, found itself deeply entangled in the crisis. A direct conflict between Iran and Israel would inevitably draw the U.S. into the fray, potentially triggering a global conflagration. Russia, a key ally of Iran and a major player in the Middle East, also watched the situation with growing concern. Moscow, seeking to expand its influence in the region, had no interest in a wider conflict that could destabilize the entire Middle East. The potential for a global conflict, while a frightening prospect, was not merely a theoretical concern. The interconnected nature of the globalized world meant that a regional conflict in the Middle East could have devastating consequences for the entire world. Section 10. The waiting game, uncertainty, and the future. As days turned into weeks, the world remained on tenterhooks. Iran's promised retaliation had yet to materialize, leaving everyone to speculate. The uncertainty fueled anxiety and apprehension. Some saw Iran's silence as weakness, others as patience. Iran was weighing its options carefully. The world, for now, could only wait. Only time would tell how this dangerous game would play out. A fragile peace hangs in the balance. The assassination of Ismail Haniyeh ignited historical tensions, pushing the Middle East to the brink of conflict. Iran's silence amplified uncertainty and fear in the region. Accusations flew between Tehran and Jerusalem, deepening mistrust. The international community scrambled to defuse the situation. Lack of communication channels heightened the risk of miscalculation. Each covert operation brought the region closer to the brink. The world waits for Iran's retaliation with uncertainty looming. The potential for escalation remains palpable. The path forward demands diplomacy and restraint to avoid a devastating abyss.